I have the distinct honor of introducing our first speaker, Jim Less, who will offer his unique perspectives as he gets ready to fly the X-59 aircraft. Jim is a research pilot and aerospace engineer at NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center in Edwards, California. He has flown NASA's F-15, F-18, T-34, King Air, the modified 747 Sophia Airborne Observatory, and various remotely piloted aircraft, including the MQ-9 Icana. Prior to joining NASA, Jim served as an officer and a pilot in the U.S. Air Force and flew F-111s, F-117s, and F-16s. He flew combat missions in Afghanistan and received numerous military honors, including the Air Medal, the Aerial Achievement Medal, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, and the Afghanistan Campaign Medal before he retired with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Wow. Jim is a distinguished graduate of the Reserve Officer Training Corps. He received his bachelor's degree in aeronautical engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. At the end of his presentation, Jim will be joined by Steve Grimaldi from NASA, who will moderate a brief Q&A session. Without further ado, Jim, welcome to imaginAviation. The stage is yours. On one final humorous note, Jim Less is also known by his call sign Clue, and I am really hoping he will tell us a story as to how that name came about, and more importantly, why it stuck. Jim.
Okay, thank you, Madhavan, for that kind introduction. Real quick on the call sign, I guess everybody wants to know. In the Air Force, we like our call signs, and it's usually based on something you've done, or more often than not, it's based on your name. And I showed up to my first squadron. They took one look at my last name and quickly came up with Clue. I figure it could have been worse, so I never really discouraged it, and I just went with it. I would like to thank the organizers of imaginAviation for inviting me here to speak today. It's very exciting to be a part of this event. You've already heard a little bit of a recap on the last 2 days. There were a lot of innovative topics, kind of some new ways of using aviation. This morning, we're going to talk about a more fundamental promise of aviation. What I've always thought was great about airplanes, the ability to go long distances at high speed. I'm going to talk about some of the innovations that we need to work on and develop in order to meet our quest for quieter and faster travel. Next slide. So as a kid, okay, you're seeing the slide. As a kid, I grew up in the 1970s and 80s, fascinated by airplanes and space travel. I read everything I could find about test pilots and X-planes and the space shuttle. To a kid in the 70s and 80s, progress in aviation meant faster, bigger, further, higher. The future held flying cars and routine space travel, and I figured we'd all be zipping around the country in supersonic airliners. At the time, Europe was developing the Concorde, the Soviet Union was working on the Tu-144, and US industry was working on an American version of the SST. For a number of reasons, though, the American SST never took off, and the Concorde, while that proved to be a technological marvel, it really only ever served a small part of the market. If I could see all of you, I'd ask for a show of hands out there who's ever flown supersonic. I'm guessing that's going to be a pretty small number. I'll raise my hand. I've flown supersonic, actually hundreds of times, but that's because I was in the Air Force, and then I started working for NASA, and that's part of my job. I've only ever flown supersonic in restricted airspace or specially designated corridors. I've never traveled anywhere supersonic. I've always landed back at the base where I started. One of the primary barriers to supersonic travel is the sonic boom. As American industry was working to develop an SST, there were enough people worried about the sonic booms that they lobbied their congressmen, and pretty soon, back in the 70s, they instituted a regulation prohibiting supersonic flight over land, except for the government and the military. A common misconception about sonic booms is that the sonic boom is only created when you first pass through the speed of sound. and then you don't have to worry about it. If only it were that easy. Next slide. A good analogy to a sonic boom is a boat wake. When a boat is moving slowly through the water, it's pushing the water out of the way and the waves move out in front of it. As the boat goes faster, those waves start building up as the boat is reaching the speed that the waves are traveling. And then finally, if the boat goes faster than the waves, it gets up on step and it's traveling along without pushing anything in front of it, but it does leave a V-shaped wake behind it everywhere it goes. Well, unfortunately, supersonic airplanes do the same thing. Next slide. You can see on the left a picture of a T-38 in supersonic flight, and these are shock waves coming off it. So actually, it's not just one shock wave at the nose, but it's a series of shock waves along the entire aircraft. The strongest ones are at the nose and at the tail, but those shock waves reach all the way to the ground. And in fact, they reach out about 25 miles either side of the flight path of the aircraft. And if you're going to travel supersonic across the country, a lot of people are going to hear your boom. So another virtual show of hands. Has anybody gone or anybody heard a sonic boom in the audience? I imagine more of you have heard that than have actually traveled supersonic. We hear them almost every day here at Armstrong. If I could have arranged for one, I would have one going on in the background right now. But a sonic boom, if you haven't heard it, it sounds like a small explosion or lightning real close to you. It will rattle your windows. It's loud and startling. It will set off car alarms. It'll wake your baby. It'll get your dogs barking. So if we're going to travel supersonic back and forth across the US, we need to do something about that sonic boom. Fortunately, at NASA and in industry and academia for the last several decades, a lot of smart scientists and engineers have been working on this problem. And in 2019, NASA decided the technology was ready, the time was right, and we would build a quiet supersonic airplane and show that it could be done. Next slide. We issued a contract to the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and they are actually building an aircraft right now. This is an old picture. Most of these panels that are missing are on the aircraft. It's out of the jigs. It's sitting on its gear. Next slide. And just recently, we installed the engine in the back of it. So we are hoping to fly this year. We're working very hard to make that happen. Next slide. So that is the X-59 aircraft. You may see in the bottom of my screen there, bottom of my slides, it says Quesst. Quest is the mission, NASA's mission, to advance quiet supersonic travel. We have three major phases. Phase one is what's going on right now. That's the aircraft development. As soon as the airplane is ready to fly, we'll get it airborne. We will check it out, make sure that it's safe to operate, all the systems work correctly. And then after we've cleared that, we can move on to phase two. This is where our scientists and engineers really get involved and get excited as we measure the results and see whether we're achieving the quiet signature that we were hoping for. And after that, finally, phase three, community response, we'll take the airplane out around the country and fly over certain population centers and gauge the community response. And the goal is to try to get the rules changed prohibiting supersonic flight. Next slide. So here's the aircraft. It's going to weigh about 25,000 pounds at takeoff, which is actually fairly light for a supersonic airplane. You'll notice it's very long and skinny, though. And that's, for now, that's about all I'll say about how we're making it quiet. Long and skinny is key. It's about 100 feet long and only 30-foot wingspan. It has one engine, a GE 414, which we've taken from a F-18 Super Hornet. It's designed to cruise at Mach 1.4 at about 55,000 feet. Next slide. Like a lot of X-planes, it is designed using commercial off-the-shelf products to minimize cost and minimize the time needed to develop new systems. The cockpit itself is based on the T-38 trainer. It's actually the rear seat of a T-38. We use the canopy and the ejection seat so that we don't have to develop those items. And the entire rest of the airplane is actually built around that cockpit. A few other things to notice. Has a conventional tail, it has a little T-tail, and then it has canards. It has a lot of surfaces on it, and that's all part of quieting the sonic boom. I said we used a lot of different parts. Said the engine was from the F-18. In the cockpit, the stick is actually out of the F-117. The landing gear is from an F-16. A lot of the electrical and hydraulic components inside are taken from F-18s and other proven aircraft. Next slide. If you looked closely, though, at that picture, one of the things that might stand out is that there is really no forward visibility for the pilot. That long, skinny nose blocks our view of where we're going. You can even see a couple side portals there, but about all those show us is a view of those gray canards in front of us. So one of the big innovations we needed to make this happen is what we call the external vision system. We've got engineers at NASA that have been developing this system to use a high definition camera and an ultra high def monitor. We've positioned the monitor in the cockpit right where a front window would be. And if we get the camera video aligned just right, it'll look like we are actually looking through the nose, even though we can't really see that. We've already flight tested this system. You see a picture on the lower left there of a King Air where we mounted the actual hardware we're going to be flying. And we flew around making sure that the video quality would be sufficient. One of the interesting benefits of this, we did side-by-side comparison with the video camera. We could actually see other airplanes further away than looking through the window with our naked eye. So we think this is going to actually be very beneficial. Next slide. There's going to be a lot of challenging aspects to flying this airplane, not being able to see out the front being a large one of those challenges. So we figured we needed to practice ahead of time. We've spent a lot of time and effort building a pretty elaborate simulator here at NASA. You can see a picture of it up on the screen. We actually have 3 walls of high-def TVs giving us a view of the outside world, and with the cockpit in the middle. Next slide. The cockpit for our simulator was designed from the exact same blueprints that the aircraft is being built to. It has all the same displays, same seat, same knobs, buttons, switches. By the time we get airborne in the X-59, we're going to be pretty familiar with that cockpit. We've already all spent probably 100 hours or more sitting in that cockpit, testing things out, learning how it all works. Next slide. So once we've got the airplane flying and we're able to go up as high and fast as we need to, we get to phase 2 where we're measuring the shock waves. One of the main tools for that is what we call shock probing. You see a picture there of an F-15 we have at NASA with a specially modified nose boom on the front. And we're going to fly the F-15 up close to the X-59 and actually fly it through the shock waves and measure the pressure changes. Here's where I get to hopefully use my models if you guys can see this. X-59 will travel along at 1.4 Mach, 55,000 feet, and then the F-15 will come up and probe fore and aft through the shock waves, measuring what we're doing. And then maybe another view here. So the scientists are going to want to see different positions under, to the side, below. And so if you go back to the slide, the other picture there is a system we call Aligns. We used a data link and a special display to give the pilot guidance so that they could probe the shock wave at exactly the position that the scientists are interested in seeing. Next slide. So in addition to probing up close to the aircraft, we want to get a better idea what the entire shock pattern looks like. Again, the example of the T-38 there shows that it is a whole series of shock waves coming off the aircraft. You can't normally see those in flight. That is a special image called a Schlieren image. Normally, Schlieren imagery is only done on tiny models in supersonic wind tunnels. We wanted to see what the actual shock pattern on the actual airplane looked like. So some very smart folks developed a technique for getting Schlieren images of a real airplane airborne in flight. In order to take a Schlieren image, you need some kind of a background. And if you think about it, up in the sky against a blue background, it's really nothing to see there. So the innovative idea someone came up with was that if we fly across the face of the sun relative to the camera aircraft, then those shock waves could be made visible. And it does take a lot of computer processing afterwards. That's not something we're seeing real time necessarily. But again, to position that F-15 in just the right place to eclipse the sun with the X-59, we need to be within about 30 feet of altitude, 30 feet left of right of the correct position. So we use that aligns display in a different mode to, again, guide the pilot into the right position. Next slide. So as you can see, if you're going to do something as transitional and new as the X-59, there's going to be a lot of innovative things that have to happen. One of the main innovations is the unique shape and the design that instead of producing a sonic boom is going to produce a soft thump. And I think some of our panelists later will give you a little more information about that. The external vision systems, that's a big innovation that allows us to see where we're going and take off and land the plane, certainly. We've made extensive use of this high fidelity simulator to validate the design and for pilot training so that when we get airborne, we're really ready to go. We've used the Align system for precise air-to-air positioning to get the data that we need. The airborne Schlieren photography is certainly a new and innovative technique. And finally, the whole airplane itself allows us to fly an actual quiet supersonic airplane in a realistic environment to try to gauge community response to our sonic thump. Next slide. Again, I'd just like to thank you for inviting me here today. It's an exciting time to be in aviation, and I am certainly looking forward to hopping in the X-59 and ushering in a new era of quiet supersonic travel. Any questions?
Jim, thanks so much. Really appreciate your presentation on this. And there are a bunch of questions in the chat, and I will encourage other people to go ahead and enter them into the system, and we'll have a great conversation here. But Clue, one of the first questions in there that is, I think people are really interested to know is, if you're in a subsonic commercial aircraft and you're in the air and one of the X-59 planes overtakes them, will you be able to hear the sonic boom within that commercial vehicle?
You would have to be very close for that to happen. I think mainly because another airplane is pressurized and the skin of the aircraft is fairly rigid because of that pressurization. You don't actually feel that shock wave. We fly around all the time at Edwards, and other airplanes are going supersonic overhead, and you don't feel their shock wave or hear anything. In fact, for some testing that we've done trying to measure shock waves, we have a motor glider that we get in position. They shut off the motor, and then they get as quiet as they can and listen for the shock wave. And they have recording microphones on there to measure it, but sometimes they don't even hear it under those circumstances. So no, in an airliner, you're not going to hear it.
Right. I assume if you're getting that close, there'll be other issues in the air that you need to worry about.
Well, we're going to be at 55,000 feet or higher, so I don't think most airliners aren't going to be up there.
Right. I wouldn't think so. Hey, Chloe, you've been a pilot for a long time now. We heard your bio, and it's wonderful. But can you talk to us about the anticipation and excitement you have of flying this X-59 compared to maybe other vehicles you've tested?
Well, absolutely. One of the highlights of a test pilot's career is flying something like an X-plane. I'm one of 3 pilots that's going to fly it. I'm probably not going to be first. The Lockheed Martin test pilot is scheduled to make the first few flights, and then Nils Larson, the other NASA test pilot, and I will be getting on board pretty soon after that. But to fly a unique airplane like this that others haven't flown is just an amazing thing to be able to do, and to have a good purpose. I mean, we're advancing technology in aviation, hopefully ushering in a new era of flight and doing something transformative. So it's very professionally rewarding, as I like to say.
Oh, that's great. And as you said, it's very rewarding for the industry and for aviation in general and for the public. So that is exciting. Um, as you discussed in your presentation, you showed some nice images of it. The view from the cockpit is very different from any other
Yes.
vehicle you've flown. Can you talk to us about what it's like? And you've been in the simulators, but what it's like flying with that external vision system versus just visual representation with your eyes?
Well, so far we've only seen simulated images, but based on the technology, I think it's going to look a lot like looking out the window. Um, One comparison we have, though, is we fly in the back seat of our F-15 or the back seat of our F-18, and you spend most of the mission really looking at the back of the seat in front of you. If you can land the F-15 from the back seat, which we do regularly without seeing forward, this is actually going to be easier, I think. Even if the camera goes out, there's a lot of people wringing their hands. What are they going to do if the camera goes out? Well, we have two cameras, first of all, so there's backups, and we have multiple displays, and even if it all goes out, you just need to get close to the runway. Then you look out either side and make sure there's an even amount of pavement on each side, and land. So it will be different, but I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Nice. I would hope not. And it sounds like a nice adjustment, and it'll be even more to the interest of your flying the vehicle. So that's excellent. Um, I know if a lot of our viewers and probably want to know, especially any of our recreational or GA pilots, what's it like to fly supersonic?
It's not as exciting as you would think. I hate to say, the only way you really know you're going supersonic is that your Mach meter goes above 1. There's sometimes you do feel a little difference in the airplane. A lot of times the plane gets a little more stable as you go supersonic, and things kind of smooth out. The big thing you notice, though, is that you're moving across the ground a lot faster. And I've seen 1,000 miles an hour ground speed, and if you're trying to cross the country, that would certainly get your attention.
I would think so. Um, eh, you know, Clue, when not talking about when you're in your pre-flight or when you're in the cockpit, when you're anticipating this, you're just going to be doing your job. You've been trained for decades and have experience and do this, and you're an extreme professional. But in quieter times and anticipatory times, do you ever think about the bigger picture of what an aircraft of this technology could do for society and what part you could play in that?
Well, I sure hope it leads to supersonic airliners. Every time I'm traveling across the country, I work on the West Coast here. I grew up on the East Coast, and going home to visit my mom, it is a long day to get there. To be able to get across the country in a couple hours would be fantastic. I don't travel overseas that much, but if you were going to China, going to Japan, those are some of the long hauls and 14, 15-hour flights across the Pacific. If you could cut that in half, that would certainly make a big difference.
Yeah, I would. It really could make a difference and open up a lot of different travel and a lot of different industries for people too. So I think it is very exciting to think about the possibilities. There's a question in the chat. Someone mentioned they lived in DC when the Concorde was operating out of
Mhm.
Dulles. The engine noise on climb was very loud and lasted about 5 or 10 minutes. How do you think this new technology will address that?
Well, that is definitely another aspect of the problem. That is not what the X-59 is designed to tackle. But there are folks working on sustainable fuels, better aerodynamics. If it's not fuel efficient, it's not going to be a commercial success. So there are a lot of other very smart folks, and again, in NASA and industry and academia, working on all these problems. And takeoff and landing noise is definitely something that they'll have to look at.
Right. How quiet is the X-59 in that type of flight? Is it comparable, or do they expect it to be comparable to regular 747 jets or something like that?
747 actually makes a good bit of noise. This is a
Yeah.
much smaller engine in the X-59. It's, again, the engine out of a Navy Super Hornet. We only have one, so we should be about half as loud as an F-18 taking off.
Nice, nice. Hey, Clue, we heard in your bio the many large variety of aircraft have been able to fly in your career. Little personal question: what's your favorite to fly?
Oh boy, everybody always asks that question. I guess airplanes are like kids. You don't really want to pick favorites. It wouldn't be fair to everybody. It depends a lot on what you're trying to do. If you want to go low and fast, the F-111 was a lot of fun. If you want a stealthy airplane that evades radar and can't be seen, the F-117 was great. I really did enjoy flying the F-16 as far as performance and maneuverability. It's probably all around, probably my favorite, but I think maybe in the near future, the X-59 is going to be my favorite.
Nice. There you go. That's great. It's a good coach to put you real close to the top of that list of who gets to fly it first. Um, Clue, there's a long history of flying X-planes at NASA or in the military and even in some general aviation. A lot of those test flights were flown right out of Edwards and Armstrong Flight Research Center. What's it like to you personally to know you're going to be joining that unbelievably impressive list of people that have flown test flights out of there?
It's actually pretty hard to believe. As a kid, as I said, I read all about the test pilots and X-planes, but never really saw that as something that I could do. I thought that was for other people. And somewhere along the way, I managed to get myself here. Down the hall, I walked through one of our hallways where we have paintings of some of these guys and the various X-planes they flew. I don't know whether I'm going to make a painting on the wall, but it is pretty impressive to know that they all worked here. In fact, my cube is, we're not quite sure, but my cube's within about 10 or 20 feet of where Neil Armstrong used to sit when he worked here. So we think
Nice.
about that, and we try to make sure we're not going to screw things up and make them all look bad.
Right, right. No, it's pretty good inspiration actually to have in the facility there. So that's great. Um, Hey, maybe the most important question for you. How many people do you need to really push out of the way to be the first one to fly that X-59?
Oh, one or two, but yeah. My goal is to as the junior pilot, I think I'll be flying the X-59 when the other guys are retired. So my goal is to fly it more than anybody else.
Wonderful. Good. There you go. You make up for it on the back end by doing
Yep,
some
volume.
really
Yep.
good work. Excellent. Perfect. There's one more question in the chat here I'm going to get for, and if you can answer it, great. If not, we'll carry it right into the next panel discussion. But what are the expected emissions from X-59? Will it burn more fuel flying supersonic versus subsonic? And what would be the equivalent passenger load? How do emissions compare to, say, a passenger-sized subsonic plane?
Yeah, I don't have specifics on that.
Okay.
The panel may be able to talk to it, but like driving your car, there's an optimal speed. And if you drive 55 or 60, you're going to be more fuel efficient than if you go faster. So there is a trade-off, and that's all part of the design and the marketing that will need to be done. It needs to be cost effective. People need to value the time over the cost of the fuel.
Interesting. When we talk about the X-59 and what's happening, um, it really is in the bigger picture of innovations in aviation. If there are people watching now, if they want to be aspiring pilots, if they want to follow the military track or just right into NASA research track, or even if there's the researchers and engineers behind the scenes, do you have any advice on? You've been around this industry a long time. Do you have any advice on how to innovate in aviation?
I do. I would say learn everything you can, get any bit of training you can, get any bit of experience you can. Test pilots, we try to fly as many different aircraft as we can because it just exposes us to a larger part of aviation. If you only fly fighter planes or you only fly big cargo planes, you're missing out on a lot of other things.
Mhm.
So the more you know, the more you've seen what worked, what didn't work, the better position you're going to be in to innovate. Most innovation, I don't think, comes from a sudden light bulb aha moment. It
Right.
comes from applying something that's already been done in a new way, or maybe it's just the right time for that technology to, like the X-59, I think, right time for that technology to be employed.
So when you take that innovation mindset and some of the right time for that technology to be deployed to this, what do you think the major hurdles to success? And I don't just mean demonstrating the low boom of this vehicle, but What are the major outcomes or barriers to get to commercialization?
That's probably a better question for our panel. I'd expect they'll be talking about that later. But in a lot of cases, it's really it's a will to do it. And this is we have the technology. If we apply the resources and get the right people involved, this is something we can do.
Well, maybe I'll bring it a little bit more to your personal perspective. If we envision a time 50 years out where there's a lot of these vehicles, it's common that they're flying. What are the differences in the training for the pilots that have to go through? Say the ones that do not go through the military training like you have, ones that just enter into from GA to commercial airplanes. Do you see a significant change in how they need to develop and train?
I think you definitely do need to train differently for this. Like flying fighters, things happen a lot faster. If you're moving along in your Cessna at 100 knots, you've got time to think about things. If we're covering several miles, many miles a minute, actually about a mile every 4 seconds, you need to plan ahead. You need to know what the weather is in advance. You need to pay more attention to fuel. It's going out the back at a quick pace. Slowing down and descending is actually going to be a challenge in a plane like this. You need to plan all that out. So you definitely need to have fairly experienced pilots flying a plane like this. We're going to spend a lot of time in the simulator making sure we're ready for this. We're training for all kinds of different contingencies, emergency procedures, failures. So yes, it's not something to take lightly, but it's also something we can do safely.
Nice. We're about out of time. One more question that's rather exciting and inspiring potentially. What inspires you and what you see in the next generation of the workforce for what ideas they may bring to this X-plane, future X-planes, just the general development of aviation going forward? What inspires you when you see the new generation coming up?
Well, here at NASA, certainly, we see a lot of very excited and motivated young engineers and scientists come to us. I think they've had a lot of opportunities that we didn't have when we were younger to get introduced early on to potential career fields and really specialize. When we were learning basic math and science, they're learning aeronautics. So we have some very smart people coming in, and they don't know what they don't know. They don't know that they can't do it. So sometimes that's the best way to get results. They're just going to press on and find the answers.
Right, and persevere with that interest, that curiosity, and innovative mindset that you've mentioned and that we've heard for the last couple of days in imaginAviation. That's beautiful. Love that. Really, that's all the time we have for questions today. I think we could go on and on for a long time. This is so interesting. Clue, I really want to thank you for your time today, the work you have done and will continue to do with the X-59 and other endeavors here at NASA. We're really fortunate to have you on board, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jim Less.
Thank you.